by doing that. Habit number 2. What was habit number 1? What was it? You guys are breaking my heart. Supply chain. This lady knows it. Supply chain, exactly. We have a publication supply chain. Habit number 2. We will sacrifice other interests. I've got to tell you that if you keep doing exactly what you're doing right now, keep your same schedule that you have right now, you will keep getting the same result you're getting right now, which might be no papers. If you want to change that result, you're going to have to change your schedule and make the time to write. And that means giving up something else. I spoke with researchers who gave up time watching baseball games. One researcher stopped watching baseball because he wanted to write more. Another researcher gave up time doing his favorite hobby. Other researchers had other rules that they would make to make sure that when they were writing, they were only working on the writing. And here's the common problem we have. I'll just give you an example. I walked into my writing lab at Jauda, this is a couple years ago, and there's all these students who are supposed to be working on their papers, right? And I see one PhD student, he's in year 6. He needs a paper yesterday. And what is he doing? He's playing computer games, right? Oh, not working on his paper. He's playing Sango, his favorite computer game. And I go up to him and I say, why are you playing computer games? You need a paper or you're going to die young soon. It's very important. And he said, teacher, I am playing computer games and I'm working on my paper. You see, I'm very efficient. And I can do 2 things at one time, no problem. And there's another student who's reading a paper and he's chatting on the MSN. And I say, why are you chatting on MSN? He says, well, I'm doing 2 things at one time. I'm chatting and I'm reading. But these students are just fooling themselves, right? We cannot do 2 things at one time, especially not a concentration-intensive activity like writing. It takes 15 minutes to get into what we call the writing flow. That's when the ideas come from my mind smoothly onto my paper. If you are breaking out every 3 minutes to chat on MSN, you're never writing. You're just playing games with yourself, wasting time. When you write, you just write. That's it. Nothing else. I'll tell you what I do at my house. I have an old computer in my house. Very old. And it only has one program, Microsoft Word. And I have cut the internet cord for this computer so that when I get onto this computer, the only thing I can do is write. Because you know what? What happens if you have internet on your computer? You will check email. And email is a disease, you know. It will eat up and destroy your whole day. You know what I'm talking about. You're thinking about writing and you say, let me check email just for 1 minute. The day is gone. Disappeared. Bye-bye. Don't let that happen. Remove yourself from those distractions during your writing time. Keep it only for writing. When it's over, of course, you can go back to something else, but you've got to be able to, again, only take a tiny little club and hit a tiny little ball into a tiny little hole a long, long way away. And I do not know how, because I have a hard time to even hit the ball. And if I hit the ball, it will definitely not go in the hole. It's going to go in the trees, in the lake, other countries, but it's not going to be close to the hole. And my uncle, he says, Steve, you have to practice your golf game. How does a golf player practice golf? A golf player does not think about golf as only one game. A golf player thinks about golf as many little games inside a big game. You see, the golf player has the different clubs, different sizes, for the different distances from the hole, for the sand and for the grass and uphill and downhill and far and near, and he will choose the club that will best suit this part of the game. Now, some clubs, he's good. Other clubs, he's bad. He knows if he wants to improve his whole game, he will practice where he is weak over and over again to improve his total score. Well, that's exactly what we do as researchers. We understand that research publication is more than just one game. We have our research, which we do in our lab. That's fine, but that's only one part of our game. Then we have the writing, the grammar, the English. That's another part. We have the organization of our introduction, of our results, of our methods, our discussion. That's other parts. We have the journal selection part. How we talk to the editor, how we talk to reviewers, how we revise our rejected paper before we send to a new journal. All of these are parts of our total publication game that influence our total score. So as good researchers, what do? We identify our weakness and we practice to improve. Exactly. Let me give you a quote from one of my interviews about this. Now this scholar published many papers. In fact, he published 7 papers last year. But I want you to notice this quote. He's not talking about how good he is. No. He is still focused on his weakness. He's a good golf player. He's still trying to improve his game all the time. What does he say? He says, traditionally, my introduction is a bit weak. I have a challenge selling the problem to reviewers. I've got to be able to present the problem better if I want people to be interested in my solution. I'm getting better, but I'm constantly aware that this is a weakness and I need to practice to improve. He knows where he can get more points. He's working on improving his game. He's a good player already, but he's getting better. Now, what is his weakness? His weakness is challenge selling the problem to reviewers. That's a common problem, by the way. In your introduction, if you cannot sell the problem, no one will ever care about your solution, because nothing wastes my time more than reading a solution to a problem I don't have, right? That wastes more time than anything in the world. You better convince me of the monster, the value of the monster, before you kill that monster, because we judge you by the level of the monster you kill. Big monster, big hero. Little monster, we just feel sorry for the monster if you kill the little monster. So make sure that you define your problem, sell your problem in your introduction, right in the beginning. That's where your impact is. And that's this scholar's problem, and perhaps many of our problem as well. We can all do better there. That's one aspect of the game. Like I'm talking about, we identify where we are losing points. What part of our paper is weakest? Work there first. Practice there first. That's where we have the highest return for the impact of our total paper. Related to my example of practicing golf in particular. I'll stay with that example. If I wanted to be a good golf player, what would I do? I would go down to the DVD store. I would buy a DVD of Tiger Woods. You know Tiger Woods? Yeah, great golf player. He's having some problems recently, poor guy, but in general, he's a very good player still. I would get a DVD of Tiger Woods. I would watch that DVD, and I would imitate or copy everything that Tiger Woods was doing. I would watch, how does Tiger Woods stand? How does he bend his knees? How does he move his shoulders? How does he move his leg, his head? I would copy everything, right? I would learn from the best. I would copy from the best. While we are practicing our research game, we can do this too. When we read papers that are particularly good in our domain, we can observe and copy how the author introduces his problem, his literature review, his knowledge gap, his objective, organizes his methods and results. And we can copy, not the results, but the structure of the paper. In fact, I want to suggest something to you. I want to suggest that you find what we call in my class, we call this a model paper. This is 2-week assignment for my students. They need to go to the library and they need to find a model paper using their keywords that's similar to theirs. And we will use this model paper as a checklist for our own paper, and we will structure the skeleton of our paper in a similar way to the skeleton of this model paper. Now let me give you some quick advice about model papers. One of my students brought me this model paper that was from a Nobel Prize winning author. In fact, this paper was one of the papers that helped him win the Nobel Prize. Very famous paper. Okay? He was excited because he said, look at this. This is an amazing paper and it's a good model for me. That type of paper is usually a very bad model paper, and I'll tell you why. The structure of those Nobel Prize winning papers is usually much different from the traditional structure of the paper that we will write. Usually the papers we will write, we will make something a little bit brighter, or a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper, or something like that. It will be incremental improvement. It will not be a fundamental change the world kind of result. So when we copy this type of fundamental paper for our incremental improvement, it usually doesn't work well at all. Here's the other thing. We don't know why this fundamental paper was published. Was it because the results were very good? Or because the author was very famous? Or because the writing was very good? You understand? Maybe the author was famous and the results were great, the writing was poor, but nobody cares because it was such a famous result. We could be copying the wrong thing. Better, when you're looking for a model paper, better go to the library, find a mid-level journal, find an author who is experienced but not famous, and find a paper where the results were not good or even failed. Because then you know the writing must be very good. Because if the results were bad and the author wasn't famous and the writing was poor, that paper would definitely be rejected. So you know the writing must be good if you can eliminate for the famous author and eliminate for the great results. Those resulting papers that you will find can be very, very helpful. I was working with one of my students in the medical school who found this paper by Palos. His name was Palos. And he did a study on the sleep disorder of Japanese graduate students. All right, this was the paper. It was an interesting paper because in the beginning, Palos thought, I don't think Japanese students sleep very well because American graduate students don't sleep very well. And Japan has a higher stress culture than America does, so Japanese students don't sleep very well. This was his idea. And in the end, he was wrong. The Japanese students sleep like babies. No problem, okay? So basically, his whole hypothesis was wrong, but the paper's still published. And that's what makes it a very good paper for us in our class. And when we went through his model paper, the paper was beautiful. I mean, it was just perfect. The introduction, the problem was well defined. And the objective was great. And the methods were so well organized. And the results were good. But the implications were the best. Basically, the author said, even though I died, I identified ways that other people won't die like me. And here's my contribution, my future work. And he had such a great implication section. And when we copied that structure, of course, we were able to publish too. Because our results were better than him. But we used sort of his paper as our model paper, and that helped us a lot. You can consider doing something similar. Find the model paper again where the results are not that fantastic, but still published. You know that's probably a pretty well-written paper. So now my wedding is delayed 1 year. This is a sad story, but it has a happy ending. The next year, this same PhD student wrote and published 3 papers. It was amazing. He was on fire, writing, publishing, writing, publishing, writing, publishing. Now, was he thinking about writing? Was he thinking about writing? No. He was thinking about his beautiful future wife, right? And this thought was motivating him. This thought was inspiring him. Now, I don't know what motivates you, but I'm sure it's not writing. So you need to think carefully about what does motivate you and create a beautiful picture in your mind of whatever that is. Maybe it's getting funding, maybe it's getting acknowledged, maybe it's getting promoted, maybe it's not being fired, I don't know. And you need to keep that image in front of you all the time to keep you going on those dark, cold nights when you want to go to bed, but you know you should write. This image, this thought, this picture in your mind will inspire you and help you to keep your writing sustainable. Keep you writing. Let's go to the next one. Habit number 5. And this is a big one. This is a very important one as well. In fact, it's so important that I don't want to break it in two, and I'm going to need some time. Let's take a break, okay? 10-minute break. I have 11:45. Let's come back at 5 minutes to 11, okay? Come back at 5 minutes to 11. Get some coffee. Come back cheerful, happy, and full of sunshine. Don't run away. I will find you. And we will continue right after this. I also have a newsletter that I brought about creating good writing habits by making outlines and pictures. If you want a copy, you can pick one up. 10 minutes and we will continue. People in your paper, they very well could be deciding the fate of your paper. Be careful about that. Now, let's give you some examples of potentially offensive citation. Something that might make the reviewer unhappy. The deficiency of Smith's approach is. The problems with Smith's papers are. A serious weakness with Smith's argument, however, is that. The key problem with Smith's explanation is that. It seems that Smith's understanding of the X framework is questionable. Means Smith is a little bit stupid. Smith will not appreciate this, even if it's true. Even if it's true. Now, you might be lucky. Maybe Smith will say, "Thank you, young man, for showing me and the whole world that I have been wrong for 40 years. Except, maybe he will say that, but maybe not. Maybe he will find other reasons for rejection, like English. That's a very good reason to reject you, right? Doesn't even have to talk about that particular issue. He can find other excuses. Not only that, but even if he's not your reviewer, his friend is your reviewer, his PhD student is your reviewer, you live in a very small domain, in a very small pool. In fact, there are less than 100 active reviewers in every domain. Less than 100. So if you make 3 of them angry, and each of them tells 10 of their friends, well, now 30% of your reviewers hate you. And reviewers don't die very often. They live a long time. They could reject you many, many times before they retire. Be careful about how you talk about these very few, very important, very influential decision makers in your small, small domain, in your small pool. Now, of course, we must show a difference between our work and others' work. But how can we do this politely? How can we do this nicely? Let me give you some examples. Smith's model was effective in the X problem, however in Y. Okay, here I'm saying he was effective in his problem, but I have a different problem. That's much better than saying he's an idiot and I'm a genius, right? Or here's another one. The X benefit of Smith's approach are not applicable to Y. He had a benefit, but I couldn't apply it. This is better than talking about his fatal flaw and his critical weakness and my strength. You understand how now we're not saying he's right or he's wrong, I'm right. We're saying we are different. We had different problems, and thus we had to have a different solution. However, we are still thankful for the previous work. We're being careful because, again, to be a high-impact researcher, we have to be aware of this political aspect of the publication process, of the review process. If you don't believe me that reviewers are sensitive, let me show you some reviewer comments from my civil engineering writing lab. This is 7 years ago in my Jiaoda class. Here's a reviewer comment that a student got. The reviewer says, "I don't think you treated Smith fairly in your literature review. His insights deserve more respect." Who's our reviewer? Smith, that's right, yeah. And he's unhappy that we have criticized him, and very fortunately he told us his name. They don't usually do this. We were lucky. When we changed it, we said something like, Smith's fundamental contribution was necessary for our research. And Smith said, accept. It is not our job to fight reviewers, it's our job to get published. Let's be careful that how we talk about reviewers does not unnecessarily create a war with the reviewers. Because when you fight reviewers, reviewers always win. This is the key point. So don't start fighting. Don't start fighting. In fact, I'm going to go a step further. Don't criticize them. In fact, we will compliment them. We will say something nice about them. We will say that we are extending his model and that we are basing our work on his work, that we will say he is fundamental. He will be so happy. I'm fundamental? Accept. English errors? I don't care. He's going to be happy because this is a very positive citation for him. We're giving him a good motivation to say yes to our work. One other thing related to this political aspect of review. I encourage you, meet 100 active researchers in your domain, because then you will have met your reviewers. And this is why we go to conferences, right? We go to conferences to present our work, yes, but more important, we go to conferences to make the guanxi with our reviewers. We want to shake hands with our reviewers and buy them a Jeonju Naicha, so that in the future they'll say, oh, I remember Steve. Oh, he bought me a Jeonju Naicha. He's a nice guy. Accept, right? We are playing the same little dirty game. Now, everybody's doing this. I actually got this idea from a professor from Texas A&M. Big guy, actually. He's about this tall, much taller than me. He visited Taiwan 5 years ago. Shaved head, big beard, huge shoulders, no neck. You know, he doesn't look like a high-impact researcher to me. He looks like the motorcycle gangster. You know. Published an amazing amount of papers in the marketing domain. I mean, amazing. And I asked him, how can you publish so many papers? And he said, Steve, that's easy. I know all my reviewers. Big smile. He said, I'm in marketing, and I know the first rule in marketing is know your customer. My customers are my reviewers, so every time I go to a conference, I have a list of all the active reviewers in my domain. And I go around and I shake their hand and I buy them a coffee. And if there's a new reviewer who comes in, I tell him my topic, he tells me his. I wink, he winks, we're friends, he said. Then I know whenever my paper goes to a reviewer, my friend will read it. Now, friends don't always accept you, but your chances are higher. And he said, of course, this is why we go to conferences. So when you go to the conference the next time, don't waste time sitting in the corner and being shy. Walk around, smile, shake hands, buy Jeonju Naicha. Because these are your decision makers. These are the people who will decide your fate, not only this time, but many papers in the future. If you make the good relationships now, these people could be accepting your papers many times before they retire. And they want to meet you too. Why? Because you could be accepting their papers as well. You could be their reviewer too. We're all playing the same game. So again, when you go to the conference, be social. Walk around. Meet people. And when you choose a conference, choose the conference where you have the highest potential to meet your reviewers. How do you know who that is? Well, look in your references. Remember, that's where your reviewer comes from. And take them into Google Scholar and see where are all of my references going. You'll be surprised where they go. If your references keep going there, you want to be there too. Chatting and smiling nicely. Survival skill for those of us who are trying to publish our work. And then when you get home, back to Taiwan, cite researchers who like you. That's right. You meet someone at the conference, he's a very nice guy, put his name into your paper. Hopefully he'll be your reviewer. And hopefully he'll say, oh, I remember Steve. Yes, accept. Hopefully. Put him ideally on the first page. Because usually the editor will choose the references from page 1 because he doesn't have time to read your whole paper. So the first 3 or 4 names have higher potential to be reviewers than on other later pages in your document. Put the nice people on the first page to give yourself the higher probability to get a favorable review from someone who already likes you. Another thing you should do, look through the journal you are submitting to for the previous 1 year. See who else has published in this journal on your topic. He has a high potential to be your reviewer because the editor will remember him, and that guy owes the editor a favor, so he will say yes to be a reviewer. Put him in a good location, say something nice about him. Ideally, also go to the conference and shake his hand first to prepare the good political background for his reading and acceptance of your paper. At least don't criticize this guy too much in your paper. At a minimum, don't be mean. Try to be nice. Try to meet him if possible. Because you are human, you will feel these emotions about your rejected paper. I want to go through the steps of pain that you will feel so that when your paper is rejected, you will not feel bad because you feel bad, right? Everyone feels bad. First emotion, you open the mail, you see the rejection paper. First emotion will be depression. Oh, you will feel so blue. It will rain every day for a week. When a student disappears from my class for 2 weeks, I know what happened. His paper was rejected. And it's natural to feel sad because your paper is your baby and no one loves your baby. Of course you're unhappy about that. Second emotion, the student will come back and he will show me the letter. He will say, you see, teacher, the stupid editor doesn't understand my genius idea. He will be angry. The third week, he will be angry at the system. He will come back and he will say, we are from Taiwan and we speak Chinese. Why do we have to write in English? Why do we have to do SCI, SSCI? What is SCI? That's week 3. Week 4, he will consider changing his job. He will say, why am I a PhD student? I don't even like research. My friend is selling cho tofu in the night market and making a lot of money. I should go sell Jeonju Naicha. It would be more interesting. I would make more money. I don't even like this life. Week 5, he will come back and he will say, well, you know, maybe the reviewer had some good points. Maybe the editor has some good points. Maybe I can change something. My point is, this is a process, okay? You won't get to this immediately. Take your time. You'll get here eventually. But in fact, one of my students, when he got here, he finally said, teacher, you know, actually, I'm happy my paper was not published because when I look through the paper, there are some embarrassing mistakes here that I would feel embarrassed if the paper were published. Now, this is only after 5 weeks he said that. In the beginning, he went through all of these steps, and so will you. It's okay. Take your time, and when you're ready, send that paper back to a new journal. But, and this is important, 很重要. Before you send your rejected paper to a new journal, you want to hide any evidence that that paper was rejected before. Why? Because no editor likes to accept another editor's garbage. That's why. And if the editor thinks your paper was previously rejected, he will reject it again, right? He will have a negative impression of your paper. So you need to hide the evidence. Now, how do editors know? How do reviewers know that your paper was rejected before? Well, there are several easy ways. Number one, Microsoft Word will help them a lot. You see, Microsoft Word keeps a file of when your document was created and every time the document was revised, right? And when you email that file, the editor just puts his mouse over it and he can see this file was created in 2007, was revised in 2009, revised again in 2011. He'll know this is an old paper and it was rejected twice. It's been traveling around. Keep traveling, he will say. He will reject it again. So what should we do? Every time your paper is returned, make sure to hide or delete the document property file in Microsoft Word, or copy and paste to a new file so it looks like a fresh paper. Don't send that old rejected paper to a new editor. Second, the editor will look in the back of your paper and the references section. and he will see when is the most recent reference. If the most recent reference is from 2007, he will think, that's when you wrote the paper, 2007. It's 2013. That's an old paper. He'll know. So what's the next thing we do? When we get our paper back, when it's been rejected, we add a new reference. Doesn't really matter what the reference is about. New reference from 2013 March. Now it looks like the paper is very fresh and we just finished it. It's very new again. Third thing you do before you return the paper to a new journal. Remember, the editor will choose your references from your paper. Page 1, remember page 1 of your paper has high chance to be the reviewer. So what should you do? Change the references on page 1 or what? Or you'll get the same reviewer again. Because editors will use the same reviewer between the journals. You don't want to get the same reviewer again. The reviewer doesn't like you. If he didn't like you the first time, he will like you even less the second time. So make sure you take the page 1 references and put them on the bottom of page 3, in the dark somewhere where they're unlikely to be found. Put new references on page 1 so you can get new reviewers. Otherwise, you'll get the same reviewers again, high potential, and of course, they'll reject you again. So what do? Before we send our paper to a new journal, hide or delete document property. Put a new reference in your references and change page 1 references so you can get a suitable or new reviewer as well. Remember, everybody gets rejected. You will too. This is natural. What are your options? What are your choices? Number 1, you can abandon the article. You can leave it, walk away. And I'm sorry to say that 30% of American graduate students, after they are rejected, they give up their topic and their paper, which is sad because, as we said, there are other reasons for rejection besides the quality of your paper. Other reasons for rejection. Maybe too many. Who knows why? Don't give up so quickly. Option 2. You can send the article with no changes to another journal. Put it right back in the mail, send it right out right away. Now, I think this option is better than this one. However, I suggest you do some changes, right? Before you send it out, change new reference, put a new reference in the end, change page 1, change the document property, at least. Also, go through the reviewer comments from the rejecting journal and see if you can make some minor revisions to your paper. English mistakes, for example. Definitely change those. Some little small mistakes that are easy to change. Fix those up before you send it out. However, don't change too much for the rejecting journal. Don't do a major revision for a journal that's rejecting you. Maybe the next journal will like your paper just like it is. So we only do the major revision for the journal that might accept us. If we have no chance, we don't waste too much time doing the major revision for that journal. Option 3, revise the article and send to another journal. This is our best option. Most of the time, unless we are sure that our paper has a fatal flaw that everybody will reject, then we should try at least 1 or 2 more times before we give up on that paper. And quicker the better. A paper sitting on your desk will bring you no good news. Get that paper out, and soon, and fast, to a new journal to give you a new chance. The last option, you can fight with the editor of the rejecting journal and ask him to try again. This is usually a bad idea. Editors don't change their mind about this. Usually it's best to just move on to a new journal, especially because your domain is small. And if you start fighting the editor will tell the reviewers your name to give him a response. And now the reviewers know your name, and they don't like you, and the editor doesn't like you, and he keeps a record in the file, and the journal doesn't like you. Basically, you burn a lot of bridges in a small area. Best just to move on to a new journal. The quicker the better. Get a review. That's probably not the reason you are rejected quickly. Let me talk about why you might have got the fast editor rejection. The most common reason is backlog. Now, this is a dirty secret in academic publishing, but I want to talk to you about it. What is backlog? Well, some journals have accepted too many papers. Some journals, especially older journals, have accepted papers for 3, 4, or 5 years in advance. And before they can publish your paper, they have to publish all of the papers before you. This is a very big problem in academic publishing. Now, this is a problem if we get accepted because we have to wait for our turn. But sometimes the editor will say, this is ridiculous. We have too many papers. Reject every paper until we can publish our backlog. So what does the editor do? He quietly sends the same letter to everybody. Thank you, but no thank you. Thank you, but no thank you. He can't tell you the real reason because he may kill his journal. So he silently rejects everybody. Don't worry about this. Just send it to a new journal. We don't know anything about our quality until we can get a review. So until you get a real review, peer review from reviewers, don't waste time crying about this. Just send it out to a new journal as fast as you can. Another reason for the quick rejection. Maybe the editor already has a paper on your topic. He already said yes to this guy. Your paper might be better, but you came too late. It's all right. Just try a new journal. Finally, maybe the editor doesn't like your topic or style. Might not be the fault of your paper. It's just the editor's preference. However, if you did your homework, and if you read the journal's website and read the editor's letter, then you should be able to identify this in advance if you did your homework. If you did not do your homework, this could be your reason for editor rejection as well. Either way, for all of these reasons, get the paper to a new journal. Don't waste time here. Unless you have a reviewer comment, there's nothing you can do. We should just send it out. When should you start contacting the editor about your paper? You send your paper away, you're waiting, you're checking the mail every day. After 3 months, you should send 1 email to the editor asking about your paper. After 4 months, send 2 emails. After 6 months, every day. After 6 months, we will go a little bit crazy if we don't hear anything from our editor. Now, if the editor responds, we're okay. We can wait. If he doesn't respond, after 6 months, we will get very nervous. Why? Because our paper might be lost. Because maybe the editor has no idea what we're talking about. I had a student, after 8 months, he called the editor. Where's my paper? The editor said, paper? What paper? Oh, yeah, oh. If after 6 months you still hear nothing, I encourage you, withdraw your paper, submit to a new journal, because research shows that the longer you wait for peer review, the more negative the review is likely to be. Basically, late reviewers want to show why your paper was not valuable anyway. It didn't matter if they were late. It should have been rejected. They're more likely to recommend rejection. So, after 6 months, and I know this is a personal decision, there's no rule about this. I know you think, if I keep waiting longer, maybe they will accept me, but actually your chances are dropping of acceptance after 6 months. And in my lab, after 6 months, we will withdraw our paper. However, you must send 1 more paper to the editor. And this last letter, you should say, I am withdrawing my paper titled, which I submitted to your journal on this date. Make sure you send that last paper. Why? If you don't, and you send that paper to a new journal, that's called double submission, right? And that's a very serious problem. And I met one scholar down in Chiayi. Sad story. I was doing a presentation at her institute. She sent her paper to a journal. She waited 8 months, okay? No response. She emailed every human she could find on the journal website. Nobody replied. So she thought, everybody died, you know? I don't know. So she sent her paper to a new journal. Here's the problem. The same reviewer from journal A got her paper for journal B. And that's very common because of the page 1 problem that I already talked about, right? So here the reviewer already has her paper from the first journal, he gets it on the second journal, and he emails both editors saying, this is the double submission problem. Those editors are very angry, and they email every other journal in their domain, warning them about this author and her reading that students have. They think Good writers must like writing, and because I don't like writing, I must not be a good writer. This is how their logic works. And it's wrong, because nobody likes writing. We just talked about that. Even the great writers hate writing just as much as you and I do. It's not fun. We don't expect it to be fun. Writing is what we call, in English, we call it a necessary evil. It's the thing you hate to do, but you have to do it. This is writing, all right? So we don't wait for it to be fun. We don't wait to feel like writing. Why? Because we will never feel like writing. Never. I know, I've written papers, and I've never felt like it. If I waited, I'd have no papers. Everyone's the same. Everyone's the same. It's not something we enjoy. So don't expect to enjoy it. Don't expect to feel like it. It's painful. Now, because it's painful, we have to plan it carefully, and we have to keep the pain short and often. The key to writing a lot is not writing in big blocks of time. No. The key to writing a lot is to write little and often. Little and often. Little and often. Why is this so important? Well, first of all, the big mistake that people make is waiting for the perfect time to write. And the perfect time will never come. Why? Because you hate to write. And you will always think of some excuse, some other work to take the place of writing, right? If, let's say the day comes and you think, okay, I'm going to write all day. But you know it will be painful, so what do? You say, well, before I write all day, let me check my email just for a minute. Let me call my mother, because calling your mother is important. We will think of many little jobs to keep us from the one big job that we know we need to do, because this big job is too painful. It's too hard to write all day. So again, we will never spend the time we need. So what's the solution? Don't wait for big blocks of time. You don't have big blocks. And even if you did, you would just waste a big block of time. The key to writing a lot is to schedule it a little bit every day. Start with just 15 minutes a day. In my writing class, I have students buy an egg timer. You know the egg timer? You can buy it at Darumfa. Very cheap. 1 penny. You buy it and you set it for 15 minutes. Tick, 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 ding. Right? You've seen them, right? Set that beside your computer. You set it for 15 minutes, and during the 15 minutes, you are writing. You are writing, you are writing. Every day, you are writing. What if you can think of nothing to say? Then you will write, I don't know what to say. I hate this. This is a huge waste of my time. I hate writing. 15 minutes is such a long time. My English teacher is such an idiot. Unbelievable. Ding! Finished for the day. You just began the most important habit of your entire career. If you can keep up this regular 15 minutes, little and often, you will get papers. You will get your dissertation done. If you don't start it, you're never going to get it. It won't happen. Not a chance. You've got to begin a regular habit. And then, after a couple weeks, you go to 19 minutes, 21 minutes, 23. You slowly push up your ability. It's just like exercise, okay? Let's say you want to exercise your body. You want to build muscles. Do you just go to the gym 1 day a month and exercise for 8 hours? Is that what you do? No. You will hurt yourself. It will be painful, and you'll never want to do it again. And that's exactly what you do when you wait, and then you write too much at one time. It's painful, it's miserable, it's unproductive, it's inefficient. Of course you don't want to do it again. If you want to build muscles, what do? You go for a little time, and you slowly build up your strength until you can efficiently do a little bit more and a little bit more. Now your mind is a muscle that also, your writing muscle, you will exercise it. First a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And when you use that focused time, you are very efficient in that time. When you have all day, the work stretches out and you don't do anything, and you burn out and you never want to do it again. It's a very bad habit, and it's unsustainable. The most important thing about writing is sustainability. It has to be something that can fit into our existing schedule. It has to be something that can fit with all the million emergencies that we will have every day. It has to be something that we will do. Writing in big blocks of time, we won't do. You know you won't do it. You're going to waste that time. It's not going to happen enough. We've got to have better writing habits. Now let me talk a little bit more about this. building the writing habit. I recommend you find the same time every day. In that time, you train yourself to think about writing during that time. I personally suggest the mornings. Mornings is good. Why? Well, you should do the first, most important thing early. Make sure that it gets done when you're fresh. And let me just mention that writing is the most important thing. No one gives you a promotion for reading. No one gives you a promotion for research. We only get promotions for writing and publishing about our research, right? Writing is actually the only paying activity that we do. It's the only thing that truly acknowledges what we have accomplished outside of our writing. We must make sure that that's a regular part of our schedule. Pick the same time every day, early in the morning. Now, for students, this is good because at night, their roommate is playing computer games, distracting them from their writing. In the morning, the roommate is sleeping because he was playing computer games last night. It's a good time to get some quiet time to write. Second, the same place. I told you about my ancient computer at home that I will use for writing. I have a chair, not very comfortable, that I will sit in. If the chair is too comfortable, you will sleep. Don't. Sit down in your slightly uncomfortable chair and start to write. Now, I suggest that you do not go to the library. Especially our Jiaodao library is quite dangerous. I'll tell you why. In our Jiaodao library, everybody will sleep. It's like a hotel. You walk in and there are bodies everywhere, sleeping people. And if you walk in and you make too much noise, people will wake up and say, "Shh, people are sleeping." It's special culture for the library. And if you go in there and look at all the sleeping bodies, what will happen? You will sleep too. Don't do that. You need someplace that's a little bit cool, has bright light to keep you awake, a little bit of background noise, maybe like a coffee shop or something. This would be a good location for your writing place. But just keep a consistent place every day where you train yourself to think about writing in this place. Ideally, this place will not be where you do other things. Will not be where you can be distracted by other things. Hopefully you can go to another place, only for the writing place. That would be the ideal. Third, carry a notebook or post-it notes or something to write down the ideas that come to you when you're driving your motorcycle outside of your writing time. And then during your writing time, you can begin by copying these notes into your file that you are creating for your paper. You can make a regular period of moving those notes into your permanent file. 4, don't think about negative thoughts. Don't think my English is poor. It's not my first language. Remember that most papers published in English are written by non-native English speakers. Most papers written are by people whose English is not their first language. So you are joining a massive scientific community that's also using English as their second language, and you can use it too. Sit alone in silence. If you have a hard time thinking of an idea, sit for a moment, think, and the ideas will start to come to you, especially if you've been reading outside of your writing time. Never write and edit at the same time. Either write or revise, but never on the same day. It's difficult for us to create and criticize together. We can either create or we can criticize, but not at the same time. Even native speakers, we can't do this. So don't be thinking about your grammar. Don't be thinking about your English. If you're doing the writing well, your English should look very, very ugly. It should look bad. The grammar should be horrible. Either put the ideas or revise the ideas, but don't do them at the same time. Another day you can come back, or the next week you can come back, and you begin to revise. You begin to correct that English. But if you try to do it at one time, it's already very hard to get the idea onto the paper. It's even harder to revise that idea at the same time. Don't do it. Let's talk about the writing habit again. First, I suggest you use the timed burst. 15 minutes a day is a good start. I did this workshop about 4 years ago, and a lady came to my workshop, and I was recently in Jinda doing another speech. This same lady came up to me. She has now finished her PhD and published 5 papers. She went up to 30,
And she has gotten all those papers. She graduated. Now she's an assistant professor. And she accredited exactly to this daily writing habit. It's a very powerful tool. If you're not getting papers now, I encourage you, change it. Try it. Try this little and often. It's really the only way that I've ever seen work demonstratively for people who tried it. It works because inside of us we have two selves. We have our rational, logical self, and we have the reactive, emotional self, like a little boy. We have like an adult and a little boy. Our adult self, our mature self, knows that we need a paper. So our mature self will say, Steve, you know you need a paper. Sit down and write for 8 hours. But our reactive self is like a little boy. He wants to protect us from painful things that we don't like. And he will say, oh, that's too much. Before you do that, check your email. Before you do that, do something else. His job is to protect us from these things that we don't like. But when we only say 15 minutes, it's not so painful. We can overcome that little boy self who wants to protect us from the painful thing. Our reactive self says, 15 minutes? We can do 15 minutes. That's not too bad. The timer's there. We can survive. Tick, 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 ding. Walk away. When it goes ding, walk away. Sometimes students will tell me, teacher, I just want to finish my sentence. Don't finish the sentence. Walk away. They'll say, but I'm not finished. We're never finished. We're coming back tomorrow. I want you to be eager to come back tomorrow and finish up that sentence. Don't allow yourself to ever finish like you are, to feel like you are finished, like this is a one-time activity. It's not. It's little and often. It's continual. Throughout our life as a researcher, we will integrate this little and often into our schedule. Don't read too much. Especially, don't use reading as an excuse not to write. This is everybody's favorite reason for not writing, right? I'm reading. I hear this all the time. Teacher, if I just read more, I will understand everything and I will be able to write. But will we ever understand everything? No. We'll never understand everything. Even when you think you've read everything, everything's already changed again, right? Science moves quickly. We will never know everything. Certainly not in time to write a paper about it. So what can we do? Well, we can read a few fundamental papers and then we can make a contribution based on what we know right now. You see, writing a paper is joining a conversation. You are joining a conversation in your domain. And when you join a conversation, let's say that we are talking together and someone else comes in. Does he need to listen to our conversation from the beginning to make a contribution? No. He could listen for a few minutes and then he could say, but I think, and then he could add his contribution. This is exactly what we do when we write a paper. We add based on our knowledge right now. Will we know more tomorrow? Of course. Will we know more a year from now? I hope so. Do we wait? No. Because if we keep waiting, we will never make a contribution. We will never add value. So we write based on the current knowledge that we possess. We still keep reading, of course, but we don't let that stop us from writing. We read and write together, just like a conversation. We read something, we don't wait to write it, we add it into our literature review immediately, during the next day, during our writing time. We read something, we highlight it, we immediately add it into our literature review. Otherwise, what happens? We have, like a PhD student I have right now. She came to me, she said, teacher, I have read 275 papers, and I think I'm ready to write. I have 5 notebooks filled with notes. Now I'm going back to the notebooks, and I can't remember what my notes mean, so I'm reading the papers again. Oh, disaster. Don't let that happen to you. Input immediately. Read less, write more. Write more. I suggest if you've read a dozen really fundamental papers in your domain, you should start to write immediately. You can keep reading, keep adding, but sometimes students say, teacher, what if I make a mistake? What if I did not find all the literature? That's why we have peer review, right? Because peer reviewers can read more than you can. Let them do their job. Let them identify the literature that you missed. You can add it in later. What if the peer reviewer also does not identify my error and I publish a mistake?
then you should be happy, because now you can write a second paper saying the first paper was wrong. You have 2 papers. We are not writing because we have perfect knowledge. Our knowledge will never be perfect. We write based on the contribution that we know we can make right now. Let me end today by talking to you a little bit about the reasons why people don't write. And I hope I can identify your excuse for not writing. I'm too busy. We only need 15 minutes a day, right? We're not asking you to quit your job. We're asking you to just write a little bit every single day. Everybody can do that. You wake up 15 minutes earlier, go to bed 15 minutes later. It's sustainable. It's doable. Everybody can do it. Teaching preparation takes all my extra time. Sometimes professors will use this as a reason. However, research shows, an interesting study actually, shows that researchers who publish more, scholars who publish more, are more popular with students than scholars who publish less. There's a clear correlation between publication and student evaluation, and not publication and negative evaluation. There's no sacrifice. By doing research, we become actually better at explaining to others, and our own interest comes to our students as well. We don't have to give up one to do the other. I will write just as soon as you can put whatever you like here, because it will keep changing. However, don't wait for your life to be perfect. It will never be perfect. You have to write anyway. You have to write with all the emergencies that keep coming up. And by doing the 15 minutes a day, you can do this. You can. I have to read just one more book. No, you don't have to read one more book. What you have to do is start writing. You can read too, but you've got to write. I can't get started. Use the social energy of other scholars. Have someone call you, ask you, are you writing? I see it's your writing time. Make this writing group. Support each other so that you can make sure that the writing gets done. I can't sit still. I'm going through these because the time is up. I can't sit still. Yes, you can. You've been sitting here for 2 hours. I'm sure you can sit for 15 minutes with a timer. That is sustainable. That is doable. I write so slowly that I never seem to get much done. Here's some interesting news. Everybody thinks they write slower than average. Everybody does. In all of my interviews, I would ask scholars, do you think you write faster than average, average, or slower than average? Most people think they are slower than average, 80%. Now that's not possible. We can't all be slower than average. So average must be slower than we think, right? Average must be slower than we think. In fact, one scholar said, Steve, this morning, I spent all morning revising my paper, and I added 1 comma. He said, this afternoon, I read the paper again, and I took the comma away. It's frustrating for all of us. It's slow for all of us. It's not natural. But we do it anyway, right? We do it anyway. If I have a long, productive writing day, I have a hard time getting started the next day. This is why we are very careful about not overwriting and burning out. This is why we don't wait for big blocks of time. Because just like over-exercising, it will be very painful the next day. Instead, we write little and often, so we don't have this burnout problem. I get distracted by web surfing, emailing, and text messaging. Then disconnect the internet and throw away the cell phone while you're writing. Just write. We talked about sacrificing other interests, right? We talked about focusing narrowly on writing because it takes 15 minutes to get into the writing flow that we discussed before. Teacher, my research is what's important, not my writing. What I do in the lab is what's important, not what I put on the paper. In answer to that, this researcher's comment is very interesting. He says, I used to think that research all happened in a lab, that my results were the only thing that mattered. I now realize that the experiment isn't over and the results haven't really happened until they have been shared with a wider academic community. Writing is part of research, and I'm proud to be both a researcher and author because the two can't be separated. Can't separate writing and research. Your results, they never happened until they're published. Never acknowledged, never appreciated. We've got to make sure that we are not only doing research,
but writing about those results, or again, they're useless to anybody. Let's review our 7 habits. Number 1, we have a supply chain. We sacrifice other interests, we practice our research, and we dramatize it by creating a mental model that keeps us inspired. We use the competitive, political, and supportive energy of other scholars. We get rejected, everybody does, and we write and we don't wait to enjoy it, so we do it little and often, right? Little and often. That's all I have for you today. I want to draw your attention to a couple sites. Editing.tw. We provide the editing and translation to scholars only in Taiwan and only academic. We're very focused on this problem. And we now have 25 full-time editors and translators here in our Taipei office. I also have a blog. I didn't put it on here. It's editingblog.tw. I post every week questions from scholars around Taiwan related to writing and to publishing. And you're welcome to take a look at our previous conversations. There's a lot of very valuable information on that blog that you can view if you would like. In addition, we have books that I have written on this topic. I showed you some last time, but I want to show you some new ones today. Writing Scientific Articles, Strategy and Steps. This will talk about how to use the model paper while writing our paper, and all the key points throughout the paper. And it's in Chinese. I translated it. Great reference book. I didn't write it. A professor over in Oxford did, and I got the translation rights and put it into Chinese. And it's quite popular here in Taiwan for university classes. We have another one, Science Research Writing for Non-Native Speakers of English. This goes into detail, again, on some of the details of vocabulary use and word choice throughout our academic paper. You can find these online. You can also get these at bookstores across Taiwan. They're great books. Or, if you'd like, you can get them at a special discount today, and I'll put in a DVD of our speech as well. You can see Cassie about that if you're interested. Any question about our time today? 有问题吗? No? Well, thanks for coming today, and good luck with your writing, and bye-bye.
因为像这种国外像考同学们，他们觉得还是蛮多钱。
就是它不是它里面那个电脑那个，对啊，它会开，感觉荧幕我荧幕放下，可是还没有开啊。电视荧幕，好，谢谢。哎，好像不知道。